Good morning, students. You are welcome to yet another online lecture in the series of our online classes. Earlier this week, the Vice Chancellor held a meeting with all the staff of the university and had officially announced the takeoff of online classes with all levels of students in the university. So we are already on track and will continue from there. But there are other alternatives that have been suggested which can be taken. The alternative of WhatsApp, the use of WhatsApp in teaching, and then the use of the Zoom app. So I will be meeting with the various course rep of all the programs I teach, so that all of us will be on the same page on how to use the Zoom app and how to use the WhatsApp app. So when I and the course reps meet, we'll agree on the modalities and whichever app to use, and then they will in turn inform you and properly educate you on how to use them, so that anytime we want to begin our classes, we can adopt any one of our choice. So I'll call on all of you to be ready for whichever one we're going to use. Meanwhile, the one we have been using is the YouTube. I record and then post it to you on YouTube, and then you watch. But when we use the Zoom app, all of you will appear on the screen. It's like a virtual class. You'll be seeing me, I'll be seeing all of you. You will make your contribution at the same time. You ask questions at the same time. I respond to the questions, and thereafter the class ends. That one, everybody will participate in the class, unlike what we do now. So I will encourage us to get your Android phones ready and then upload the Zoom app. Let's see how that can also work out. So on that note, we commence our today's class. Today's class, we shall be examining the environmental factors that affect educational planning. The environmental factors that affect educational planning. Now, when we talk about environmental factors here, we are not examining environment in the sense that they do in geography, as to look at the physical features of our environment and how it affects educational planning. No, that is not the issue here. What we mean by environmental factors here are the human environmental factors, the human characteristics, within a society that affects the educational planning process. Those are what we are going to examine. Now we'll look at these factors from the angle of what education does for the society and how each of these variables affects the planning process in education. First, there are three constituent parts in the educational planning process that interplay. There are three constituent parts in the educational planning process that interplay and give focus to the educational planning process. They interplay and direct the focus of the educational planning process. And what are these? They include the goals and objectives to be achieved using education. The goals and objectives to be achieved using education. Now, these goals of education try to tell what the society want to achieve using education. That is why it's usually called the goals and objectives of education. What objective do we want education to achieve for us in the country? What goals do we want to attain using education? Where do we want to be educationally? So that is the first task. That's the first thing any society does for itself, setting educational goals. Now, after setting educational goals, the next task that comes up is the task of carrying out those goals. Task of how to carry out those goals or those tasks. Here, what is involved is educational policies, educational decisions, projects, and programs to be implemented. So the first task is setting the objective and goals. The second one is, what do we do? How do we carry out this task? We carry out this task by taking decisions, by making policies, by embarking on educational projects, embarking on educational programs to actualize number one, which is the goal. Then the third factor is what we want to examine now. The third factor is the environmental factors. These environmental factors affect item 1 and 2 above. That is, the environmental factors affect the goal and objective, as well as the task to be carried out. They affect them seriously. And then how do they affect them? Those are the things we are going to examine. And then what are those environmental factors that affect the educational planning process as it concerns the task to be, as it concerns the objective and goal to be achieved, and then the task to be carried out. The environmental factors include the following: economic disposition of a country, the socio-cultural milieu of a country, the political climate of a country, the demographic characteristics of a country. So these 4 variables or 4 factors to a great extent influences the direction and the magnitude of educational programs and educational objectives to be achieved. Now, how do they affect educational planning? So that's what we're going to examine now. So let's take them one after the other. So let me repeat the environmental factors. They include the economic disposition of the country, the socio-cultural milieu of the country, the political climate of the country, and the demographic characteristics of the country. How do these variables or environmental factors affect the process of educational planning? They affect the process of educational planning in a number of ways. Let's take them one after the other. The economic disposition of a country. When we talk about the economic disposition of a country here, we talk about such things like the level of economic development of a country, the size of the economy, the occupational mix, patterns of resource distribution, and the human capital stock. When we talk about economic disposition of a country that affects educational planning, we are looking at the level of economic development of a country, the size of the economy, the occupational mix, the pattern of resource distribution, and then the human capital stock. So all this make up the economic disposition of a country. Now, the economic disposition influences and determines the direction and magnitude of the educational planning process. Let's take them one after the other. The level of economic development of a country. The level of economic development of a country. When do we say that a country is economically developed? A country is economically developed depending on the following factors. A country that is economically developed have the following characteristics. It has the following characteristics. There is high industrial development. High industrial development. There is high level of economic development. There is high level of living in those countries. High level of productivity. There is low level of unemployment. Low level of unemployment. Low level of population growth. And then they depend on themselves for resources. Now, so that's any economy that is said to be developed. These are their characteristics. Now, on the other hand, any country whose economy is not developed is characterized by the following. They have poor industrial development. They have poor industrial development. They have low economic development. They have low level of living. They have low level of productivity. They have high level of unemployment and high level of population growth, as well as external dependencies for goods and services. So you see the two characteristics or the two differences of economies. Now, from what I've just read out now, you can see that Nigeria belongs to the countries that are classified as countries that have low economic development or poor economic development. Now, a country that have poor economic development, definitely this will affect its educational planning in a number of ways. It will affect its educational planning in a number of ways, because the resource input we put into the education is a direct result of the economy of a nation. Any economy that is not buoyant will not be able to finance education to the tune that it will be able to bring about development. Because one, since the economy is poor, other sectors of the economy will be depending on that one source for its development. So the military will depend on the economy, that one source, poor economy. The education itself will equally depend on it. The agricultural sector will have their own demand on it. The health sector will still make demand on it. So for that reason, it will not be able to fund all the sectors adequately, and therefore education will suffer. So any country that is not rich economically, it will affect its education. So that is how the economy of a nation affects the educational planning process. So we just examine the level of economic development of a nation. Then the next is the size of the economy. The size of the economy. In most developed countries, they have multiple economy. They have multiple sources of income. But in Nigeria, as we have it today, you all know that our source of income, our foreign exchange earner, is just on the oil mineral. And you can see that it's already affecting us during this period, because the oil price, because of the coronavirus pandemic, has gone to the lowest ebb, and for that reason our economy has almost crashed. But other economies like US even in the midst of the pandemic is giving money out to countries, of which Nigeria is a beneficiary. So such economies, they have multiple economies, they have a lot of source of income to their economy, and therefore in the planning of their education, this will have a ripple effect on the educational planning process in that country, because any project or any goal they want to achieve using education, it will be easier for them to invest in it because the money is there. So countries that have poor economy are bound to suffer in their educational planning process. Then the occupational mix of the country. Now the occupation of a country here is used to explain the activities, the occupational activities that take place in each country that plans education. Here, say for example in Nigeria, we have different occupation. We have the medical occupation, we have the teaching profession, teaching occupation, we have those in agriculture, we have those in and all that. Now, the occupation that any country does that is predominant in that area will to a great extent determine what should be planned in their education. For example, we have the agricultural sector. We need people in that area to be able to tap the resources in agriculture and use it for economic development. So we need people, we need to develop manpower in that area. We need to develop manpower for our health sector. We need to develop manpower even for the education sector, for mines, manpower in the military. In all sectors of the economy, we need different occupational fields. And the different occupational fields that any country look forward to have will determine how it will channel the planning of its education in order to get those occupation for the country. So that's how the occupational mix of a country can also influence educational planning. Then we have the human capital stock. The human capital stock. In every country, human beings constitute the life wire of the nation, and human being is considered as capital. It is the human being that transforms the economy. So the human stock available in any nation determines the level of growth and development of that nation. And this human being can only be processed through education, through the process of education. It is education that transforms these human beings into capital. And therefore, the human stock of any country to a great extent determines the educational planning activity of that country, because it is this human being that we will transform into medical doctors, into lawyers, into teachers, use them for economic development. So the human stock available in any country will determine how education can be planned to use them for development purpose. So all of them put together. So if in a society you don't have the stock of human beings that can be transformed, it will affect educational planning. It will affect educational planning. Or if the human stock of a particular country is underdeveloped, it will also affect education. It will affect education in the sense that the human resources that will be needed to develop the society and even develop education won't be there. So that is why human stock is always very important. That the Chinese government have said it that they have the human stock, and therefore will transform their human stock into productive capacity in such a way that they will supply the entire world with products. And that's what that's what the Chinese people are doing. Everywhere you go, every market you enter is Chinese product. Every home you visit is Chinese product. They were able to use education to transform their human resources into capital assets and use them to produce all manner and types of goods and commodities and sell to the entire world. So that is what education can be used to do. So that is how the economy of a nation gives direction to the educational planning. Now, when we say the size of the economy helps to determine the human resource input that will be inputted into the education system. If the economy is poor, the infrastructural amenities that will be needed cannot be provided. If the economy is poor, the human resources in the form of teachers that will be recruited to man the education system will not be sufficient, because there won't be money to pay them, because the available resources is being competed for, and therefore only very a small amount will be allocated to education, and that amount cannot be able to take care. So if the economy is not buoyant, the education sector will suffer in terms of achieving the goals and objectives. Now, the method of the system of education to be operational in a country is also determined by the economy. You are aware that in most countries that are buoyant, education is free from primary to the university, because the economy can carry that. Now, in countries that is not buoyant financially, they may decide to restrict free education to the primary level alone, and secondary and tertiary will pay school fees. The amount of fees to be paid by an institution, public institution, is also dependent on the economic potentials of the country. If the economy is buoyant enough, school fees could be reduced. If the economy is buoyant enough, students could be given grants and aids to run programs. If the economy is buoyant, scholarships could be given and all that. So bursary payment and all that are all dependent on the economy of a nation or a state. So you see, that's how the economy affects education. The manpower that we needed in the various levels of education are sponsored through the economy. So if the economy cannot take care of all that, education will suffer for it. So it's not surprising today that most of the facilities that we need in schools are not provided because of the economic status of Nigeria. Alright, then the next other factor is socio-cultural milieu of the society in question. The socio-cultural milieu also affects the educational planning process. When we say socio-cultural milieu, what do we mean? Socio-cultural milieu here is used to mean the needs and aspirations, the social needs and aspirations of a given society. The social needs and aspirations of a given society. Now, the social needs and aspirations of a given society determines the content of what is taught in education, and therefore give direction to educational planning. The culture, the language, the values, the norms, the religion, historical antecedent of a people is inputted in the content of what is taught in school. So without this content, without these variables, the planning cannot address the social needs of the people. So it affects planning because planning will depend on these variables for it to provide content of what is to be taught in school. And remember that all these social variables, all of them go a long way to influence our attitudes, our behaviors in society. And those behaviors are necessary. They are values that are necessary for societal development. So let's see how each of them applies or direct or influences educational planning. Say, for example, the culture of the people. The culture of the people. The culture is the totality of the people's way of life, which includes the language, their dressing, their food, and their everything about them. Now, the entire business of education is to transmit cultural values. Now, these cultural values must be provided and put into the content of education and taught in school for children to imbibe it. You will see that any society that fails to teach the culture of their culture, that society is bound to suffer cultural degradation. Now, in our society, in the traditional Nigerian society, the society is noted for respect for elders. The society is noted to obey the norms, the cultural norms of the people. But today in Nigeria, what do we have? We have children that have lost respect for elders. We have a society where children behave anyhow they like. People behave anyhow they like, because these values are no longer taught the way it should be taught in the school system. What obtains is that what ought to be values taught in school is merely taught as exam subjects. So students go and write what is the meaning of social studies, what is culture, what is that, and then pass exams, and then they give them certificates, and off they go. You know, now the transformation that is supposed to take place inside them based on these teachings are not there. So there is problem in the content of what is taught socially in the school. So it is these cultural values that give content to what educational planners put in the curriculum and taught in school. It is not just for passing exam, but it's for these people, the students, to imbibe it for societal survival and transformation. The people of religion also play a significant role in educational planning. What is their belief? What is their pattern and mode of worship? How does this affect their life? And all this must be captured. And when people understand their religious belief through the process of education, they put it into practice. When they understand their historical antecedents, where they are coming from, they hold it sacrosanct and use it to unite themselves. Now, because the curriculum content of our education system in Nigeria is porous, that is why even when people have gone to school, they still do not know that there is a historical antecedent that tied the entire country Nigeria together. We all of us had common colonial antecedents. We were colonized by Britain, and that gave us our common identity. Even though there are differences in culture, those differences in culture is even what should even unite us further, because the North need the South need the North. We need products from the North to survive. The Northerners need products from the South to survive, and we also need to understudy ourselves, know the cultural practices of the different areas, understand them, and know their religious practices, and each area put their own into practice. And then there is tolerance. But all these are not taught the way they should be taught in education. Perhaps because the planning process is faulty to capture the real essence of these social variables. All right. So then the next is the political climate. The political climate of a society, to a great extent, also determines the direction of the educational planning. Now, when we say the political climate here, we talk about the political beliefs, the political practices of a given society, the ideological base of a given society. If a society is known to be a democratic society, it therefore follows that the educational planning process will include those values, those ideologies in the education system. So it directs the educational planner on what to include there in the content of education. So the planner does not rely on himself. He relies on all these variables to guide him in the process of planning. So the political ideology, the patterns of the structure, the political activities and all that determines the direction education will go, the content of education will go. Now, if a country practices democracy, of course, invariably, the school system should be able to teach democratic tenets for people to learn and imbibe it, and then when they eventually finish school, they put it into practice. Apart from that, it is also important here to note that political factors, the political players, actors in any given society, give direction to the way education should go, because they formulate the policies, they set the goals, and they also implement those policies. So it's not something you just wish away. They play a prominent role in the educational development, and therefore give direction to the planning process. So you cannot remove politics from education. You can't remove politics from education, because those political actors determine the policies, they make educational decisions and give direction the way education should go. So you can't rule out that in the planning process. So they give direction. They also release funds. They are also in charge of the economy, and since they are in charge of the economy, they release funds to education. It is because the political class has failed to release sufficient funds to education. That is why the education is not able to achieve the goal that it ought to achieve in Nigeria. Now, if we get any politicians that will be in office and give priority to education and allocate funds to education, the education system will change. So that's why they are a determining factor in the way education of a country should go. If the politicians don't have priority for education, education will suffer. If they have priority for education, education will boom. So you see how they can affect the educational planning process. So the educational planner must have a good knowledge of the political climate of a particular country, because that political climate will give him the direction of how education should go. Now then the fourth factor that influences educational planning is the demographic factor. The demographic factor. Demography is the scientific study of human population with respect to the structure and behavior of the population of a given society. Demography is the study of human population with respect to the structure and behavior of the population of a given society. We are interested here in the structure and behavior of the population. The structure and behavior of the population. When we say the structure of population of a population, what do we mean? Structure here is used to describe the age distribution of the population and then the sex distribution of a given population. When we talk about the structure of a given population, we are referring to the age distribution of that population and then the sex distribution of that population. How do these help in educational planning? How do these variables help in educational planning? Now, age in a given population the educational planner will need to extract the age and then know the age that fall under education. You know, education is age specific. The national policy provides that for a child to be in primary 1, that child must attain the age of 6. So what it means is that as soon as the child is age 6, that child should be in primary school. So if that is what it means, the educational planning implication is that provisions must be made for the child, must be planned for the child ahead of time. So in that case, in a given society, we need to have the population distribution by age in that society, and therefore use it to plan education for the specific age groups. So the number of ages 6 to 12 will determine the number of primary schools to be built. The number of 12 to 18 will determine the number of secondary schools that will be available and provided for. 18 and above, the number of children in that category will determine those to be in tertiary school, and therefore the number of tertiary schools to be built. So it helps us to plan for institutional development. It not only helping us to plan for them, you know, their distribution. How are these ages distributed? How are they found? You know, so it now enables us a school mapping and planning, where to locate schools so that these ages can be properly captured. So you see, without this, you can't properly plan education. So we need information concerning age and how these ages are distributed. So if we have more of youthful age, it has educational implication. More planning has to be done to provide provisions for them. If we have adult age, it also tells us that adult education programs have to be planned for to accommodate that age bracket into the education system and all that. So then the next is the sex distribution. How are male and female distributed among the age brackets? The distribution of the population by sex. How many men, how many women do we have, and how are they distributed is also taken care of. You know, when we get the age distribution by sex, we will now know the number of females that are within the school going age and then provide for them. We know the number of men that are within the school age bracket and then make adequate provisions for them. So sex information is important in planning of education. Then we have the behavior, the population behavior. Population behavior here is used to describe the birth rate, the death rate, the migration rate, and the size and density of the population. The birth rate explains the rate at which children are born in a given society. The rate at which children are born in a given society. It is usually calculated to arrive at the rate. Now, when a country knows the rate at which children are born, what it means is that that rate will also determine the rate at which educational provisions will be made. So if in every year a country records let us say 1 million children are born every year, 1 million children are born every year, so it means that in a year 1 million children are born. It means that in the next 6 years we'll be having 6 million children. So the educational planning implication is that provision must be made for 6 million children in primary school. So in 2020 1 million children are born. 2021 another 1 million, 2021 in that order. So it means that by 2026 we'll have about 6 million children, and provisions must be made in accordance with the rate of birth to accommodate them in the school. So it also means that in the next 12 years provision for secondary schools should also be made. So when we now know that rate at which children are born, the implication is that we also plan to expand educational infrastructure. We make plans to train more teachers. We make plans to recruit more teachers in that order. You know, so in situations where in the country, for example, we already know the rate at which children are born, but when you go to the schools, the facilities remain the same for over 20 years. One begin to imagine, did any planning take place? Situation where 6 classroom blocks built 10 years ago are still there, but the number of children coming in keep multiplying. Can we say that planning have taken place? Something is wrong somewhere. You know, so the number of the population growth determines the educational provision in all aspects, both in manpower supply and all that, and infrastructural provision. So without the population, you will not be able to plan education. So population give direction on how education should be planned. Because you are planning for human beings, and therefore you must know the number of human beings you are planning for. It's just like in a family where a man has 6 children. Those 6 children must be planned for. Their education must be planned for, or else they will be out of school. The same thing applies to the country. So a country that fails to plan education for the citizens tantamount to having planned for miscreants. So it's not surprising that most of the youth that should be school today are turning out to be criminals. So that's the implication. So either you planned for them educationally, or you have already planned for them to become criminals. And that's what is playing out. So that's why it is said that a country that fails to invest in education will invest in security. The two must go. Then the next is the death rate. Death rate. When you know the death rate of a given country, the rate at which people die, you'll be able to calculate and know what should be done in education, at least to reduce death rates. You are all aware now that with the coronavirus pandemic that is around now, a new form of education is taking place, where people now are beginning to learn how to practice health care. You know, people now can wash their hands, you keep social distancing and all that. Before you know it, now this will be in the curriculum to reduce the death toll. When before now there was no HIV education, but with the HIV scourge, HIV education was introduced into the school system, and people are now learning how to prevent it. So the rate at which people die, to reduce that, you know, educational planning have to be directed in such a way that people now begin to imbibe the knowledge, health knowledge, that will help prevent such occurrences. Then it is also important to have information on how the aging population, those who are aging and all that. So that information will help us know how to replace them. Tell us how the number of people that are retiring in the system, and then how to replace them with the younger ones. Provisions must be made for people to progress in age and all that. So as they are going out, new ones are being replaced. So therefore, it helps us to determine which sector to be planned for, you know, to take care of the demands in such areas. Then the next is migration rate. Migration rate is the number of people that move from one geographical area to another geographical area. For example, the urban rural, the population movement from rural to urban, you know, and all that, from one geographical area to the other. Now we use this to also plan. Now if you know that the migration rate is people moving from rural to urban, the educational planning implication is that educational provisions must be made, more educational provision must be made in the urban urban areas where people are migrating. Because people who move from rural to urban move for one reason or the other. It could be employment opportunities, or it could be other opportunities that are present in the urban centers that makes them to move. Could be on transfer, could be on that, several things. So when you calculate the rate at which people move, you also use it to plan for educational provision. Because people who are moving with their children need to be catered for educationally, and therefore provisions must be made. So that will also give rise to what is known as urban renewal to accommodate new persons coming in. So it means that the educational facilities in the urban centers or wherever the population is moving have to be improved upon to accommodate those who are moving. You know, a lot of factors can influence people's movement. A lot of reasons can account for that. So while people move naturally, then they must also plan the education for them naturally too, in such a way that nobody will suffer any deficiency in educational attainment. They will have the size and density of the population. The size and density of the population. The size of the population will also have a role to play in educational planning, because the size of the population will determine the number of educational provisions to be made, the number of schools to be built. Unlike what we have today, crowded classrooms and all that, this is a direct result of poor planning, because a given school should have a specific number of students that should be in that school and specific number of teachers that will be in that school. So as the population is growing, we should be able to know that we will expand educational facilities. Situations where a population is concentrated in a particular place, we should be able to know the number of the school age population in that area and the number of schools that's provided in that area. But if you watch what happens in most countries, especially in Nigeria, you will discover that in most places where they have low population, they have educational facilities that is empty. Areas where you have dense population, they have poor facilities. So what does that tell us? It tells us that other planning didn't take place. They were just merely allocated educational into those areas. You know, so school mapping or school provision has to go with the population in that area. So the population of a given area determines the number of schools that will be built in that area. So when you build primary school, it will also go a long way to determine the secondary school that we build there, because the secondary school will be the primary school will be catchment for the secondary school, and invariably to also determine the university that will be built around area to take care of those who are graduating from the secondary school. So the population's density helps to determine the number of schools to be built and the number of educational facilities to be sent across to those areas. So you see, this will guide, this population characteristics will guide the educational planner in knowing the number of children that is in a particular area, the number of schools to be built, the number of classrooms to be built, the number of equipment to be sent, the number of facilities to be sent, and the number of teachers to be sent in that area. That is why specifically the planning have also taken care of that when it is stated that one teacher is to 30 or 40 students. In every school, in every classroom of 30 teachers or 40 students, 30 or 40 students, that a teacher should take care of that number. So when that is the policy, so it means that teachers must be recruited in accordance with that. Teachers must be recruited to reflect that. But what we have in our schools today, classrooms that are meant for 40 students today is accommodating over 100 students at the risk of overestimation. Classrooms meant for 30-40 students is accommodating over 100 students with one teacher. So that is the bane of our education system. So the question now, that one asks, how is planning taking place that we can allow such type of thing to be happening? A school that is meant to accommodate one school facility that is meant to accommodate one school is being used for 2 schools. 6 classroom blocks meant for either junior or senior is now used for both junior and senior. And then when you go there, you see crowded classrooms. You begin to imagine whether anything was planned at all. Schools built over 30 years to take care of very few population today is still being used to reach population. The same thing happens across all both at the university level. The hostels that were built for students since 1975 remains the same number today. No expansion. Does it mean that we are not taking care of the educational planners are not taking care of the population characteristics of the society and planning, or what is happening? So when you examine all this now, you will now be able to connect them to each other, either the economy or the political climate or the sociocultural variables. You know, all of them are interplaying as causing this. So you see how it's affecting education. You see how it's affecting education. So you cannot remove educational planning from all these environmental factors. And the goals and policies of education cannot be efficiently and effectively achieved without an interplay of these variables. So that is the essence of this lecture, for us to understand how each of these variables or a combination of them affect the educational planning process. When you understand this as a planner, you will be able to know the extent to which each of them affects the planning process. So when you look at the education system generally, you will not be blaming the educational planner that they have not planned well and all that. You will now know that it is the interplay of these variables. As an educational planner, you are exposed to all this, so that at each point in time you will be able to carry out an analysis of all these variables and know the extent to which they affect the planning process, how they constitute a handicap, or how they constitute a hindrance in the planning process, or how they can even bring about progress in the educational planning process. On that note, we'll end today's class. If there are questions to be asked or any areas, as usual in our evening class by 8, you can raise your questions on the WhatsApp. I will respond to them. Thank you and God bless. Please continue to stay at home, continue to use hand sanitizers, wash your hand regularly, maintain social distance, and above all, keep praying that God should take us through these periods. Thank you and God bless you.